The first thing you should know about me is that I am not a man who exaggerates. I cannot afford to. For 31 years, my entire professional value has rested on a single quality, which is that when I write something down, it is true. Not dramatic, not interesting. True. A compliance reviewer who exaggerates is a reviewer who gets a county sued, and I have never been that man. So I need you to hold that in mind while I tell you that there is an evacuation diagram in our county facilities archive right now that shows a corridor no floor plan has ever contained. Not the current floor plan, not the original construction drawings, not the as-builts, not the fire maps, not the Gee's building footprint. None of them contain it. The evacuation diagram does, and it is dated next year. And it carries my initials. I never drew it. I never signed it. I have not yet lived the day it says I did. I am going to lay this out the way I would lay out any compliance finding, plainly, in sequence, using the records as they actually exist in the systems, because the records are the only part of this I can prove, and the records are also the part that has stopped me sleeping. Let me tell you what I do, because the boredom of it matters. The boredom is the whole point. I am a facilities compliance auditor for the county. More precisely, I am a life safety records reviewer. I sit between the buildings the county owns and the paper that is supposed to describe them. My work is the work of reconciliation. I review building inspection reports. I check fire evacuation diagrams against the spaces they claim to depict. I reconcile as-built drawings with the original construction documents and with whatever renovations happened in between. I validate emergency egress routes, the paths a person is supposed to take to get out of a building alive when something goes wrong. I manage the facilities compliance files for a portfolio of structures most people have forgotten the county still owns. Old courthouses, shuttered annexes, water district offices. The kind of municipal buildings that outlive their purpose but never quite get demolished, so they sit half-used or fully empty, and somebody still has to certify that they are safe, or at least safe enough that the county is not exposed when the lawyers come. That somebody on paper is me, not the safety, the proving of the safety, the documents that say it. Part of my work touches the security side, because the county contracts overnight patrols for the empty buildings, and a guard's patrol route is one more record I have to reconcile against the official building maps. A guard walks a loop. At fixed points there are small checkpoint tags, and the guard taps each one, and the taps become a route, and the route becomes a line on an invoice. I do not own that system. I only check it against mine, against the floor plans and the egress maps and the as-builts, to make sure the building a guard is walking matches the building the county has on file. It is unglamorous work, and I want to be honest about that. It is mostly the work of catching mistakes, and there are so many mistakes. As-built drawings go stale because a tenant renovates a space and nobody sends the county the updated set. A renovation gets done and the Floorplan Archive never gets the revision, so the official drawing shows a room that was demolished a decade ago. Fire maps get left on lobby walls long after they are obsolete, and someone photographs the old one for the file instead of the new one. Evacuation placards get printed wrong, an arrow pointing at a door that was sealed, a route running through a space that is now a storage closet. Mechanical chases get mislabeled as corridors. Maintenance access gets sealed and the diagram never catches up. Emergency egress routes become obsolete when an exit is bricked over, and the placard by the stairwell still tells you to go that way. Contractors make drawing errors, and the errors get scanned and filed and trusted, because once a thing is in the archive, it has the weight of truth whether it earned it or not. So when I tell you I found something I could not explain, understand that my first 10 explanations were all dull. My training, my instinct, my entire professional reflex is to assume error, to assume a stale is built, to assume an outdated placard, to assume somebody filed the wrong revision. Dramatic conclusions are how a reviewer ends his career. I am careful with words. Remember that. It becomes important. This began on an ordinary review of overnight patrol exceptions, which is the one part of my month where the security side and my side touch. November. The building is one I will call the Annex, because the parcel ID and the real name don't matter, and I would rather not say them out loud anymore. It is an old municipal annex on the north side of the county, built in the late 60s, expanded twice, then slowly emptied as departments moved to the new consolidated campus. For the last several years, it has been mostly vacant. A few archive rooms and a dead record storage operation in the basement, the rest of it dark. The county watches it because an empty public building is a liability, and a patrol twice a night lets us say we exercised reasonable care. It is the kind of building where nothing is supposed to happen. That is the entire purpose of the patrol. Presence. Deterrence. A guard walks the loop so the county can prove the loop was walked, and I reconcile the loop against the floor plan so the county can prove the loop was real. I was clearing a backlog of route exceptions. An exception is just the system flagging that a route did not complete the way the configuration expected. Almost always it is a missed checkpoint. Almost always I clear it in under a minute and move on. This one would not clear. The route was logged as complete, every checkpoint scanned, full patrol minutes, clean on its face. But the system had flagged it anyway with an exception code I see maybe twice a year. Location validation failure. The route had passed through a checkpoint inside a space the validation layer could not match to any building record. The dashboard labeled the space as a service corridor. An annex connector, it said, running between checkpoint 9, which is the east stair landing, and checkpoint 10, which is the rear maintenance hall. A short connecting corridor. The route showed the guard entering it at one end, tapping a checkpoint inside it and exiting at the other. So I pulled the current floor plan for the annex. There is no corridor between the east stair landing and the rear maintenance hall. On the floor plan, those 2 points are separated by structure. A solid block of the building, mechanical space, a riser chase, and a long load-bearing wall. There is no passage between them. To get from checkpoint 9 to checkpoint 10, a guard has to go back out to the main hall and around. There is no connector. There is no service corridor. There is a wall. This is the contradiction, and I want to state it once cleanly before I bury it in everything I did to make it go away. A patrol route includes a corridor that does not exist on any official floor plan. That is the whole of it. Everything that follows is just me, a records man, doing the only thing a records man knows how to do, which is to go to the records. I did what I always do. I started building the boring explanation. And the boring explanation for a man like me does not live in a security dashboard. It lives in the Floorplan Archive. So that is where I went, and that is where this story really happens. Not in a patrol log, but in a room full of drawings of a building that does not match itself. The first guess was the easiest one, the one that resolves 90% of these. Stale as built. The building had been renovated twice. Maybe there really had been a connector once, an old service passage from the original build, and a later renovation walled it off, and the route template still carried the checkpoint, and the floor plan in the archive was simply the wrong revision. Legacy data, the most common ghost in this entire line of work. So I went to the facility's document archive. The county keeps the whole paper life of a building going back to the day it was approved. Original construction drawings, as-built sets, renovation permits, fire marshal inspection files, life safety reports, occupancy records, maintenance diagrams, evacuation map revisions, emergency response maps. Some of it is scanned blueprints, some of it is proper CAD, some of it is microfilm somebody photographed badly in 1994. I pulled everything we had for the Annex, which is a great deal, because old public buildings generate paper the way old houses generate dust. I want to be precise here, because precision is the only thing I have left. There was never a corridor there. Not in the original 1968 construction drawings. The east stair and the rear maintenance hall are separated by mechanical space in the original plan, exactly as they are now. Not in the first renovation, which added the second floor offices. Not in the second renovation, which redid the HVAC and the riser chase. Across every drawing, every revision, every date stamp, that block of the building is solid. No passage, no connector, no corridor. So my legacy theory was already weaker than I wanted. But weak is not dead. A reviewer does not abandon the mundane explanation just because the first one fails. Maybe there was an informal opening. A maintenance cut through somebody knocked into a wall and never documented, the kind of unpermitted thing that happens in old public buildings all the time. So I checked the renovation permits. Every wall modification in a county building requires a permit. I read every permit filed against the parcel. None of them touched that block. None of them created an opening, a passage, a door, anything. The wall in the current as built is the same wall as in the original construction set. It has never, on the record, been altered. Then I went to the fire evacuation diagrams, because those are drawn to a different and higher standard, and because, if I am honest, they are the documents I trust most in the whole archive. A fire map has to show every egress path, every corridor, every door, because lives depend on it being right. A fire marshal signs off on it. It is, very often, the most accurate picture we have of how a building actually lets you out of it. I pulled the evacuation diagram revisions for the Annex, all of them in order. The first one from the 70s. The revision after the second floor offices went in. The revision after the HVAC work. The most recent one, the one that is supposed to be posted by every stairwell in the building right now. Every single one of them shows a wall between the east stair and the maintenance hall. Every single egress route runs the long way around, out to the main hall, the way the structure forces you to. Not one evacuation diagram across 50 years of revisions draws a corridor through that block. The fire map has never offered that way out because there is no way out to offer. I checked the fire marshal inspection files next. A fire marshal walks these buildings and certifies the egress, corridor by corridor, exit by exit. If a corridor existed, the marshal would have stood in it, measured it, noted its width, its exit signage, its emergency lighting. I read the inspection files going back years. They describe the east stair. They describe the maintenance hall. Between them, nothing. Not a corridor with a deficiency. Not a corridor at all. As if there were nothing in that block to inspect. I checked the life safety reports, which compile all of it, the egress capacity, the occupancy load, the travel distances to the nearest exit. The travel distances are calculated as if the wall is there, because the wall is there. If a corridor existed, every one of those numbers would be different. They are not. The whole life safety model of the building assumes solid structure in that block. I checked the maintenance diagrams, the ones the building engineers use, which often show what the architectural drawings leave out: access panels, crawl spaces, service routes. If there were a service corridor, the maintenance diagram is where it would live. It shows mechanical space and a riser chase. No corridor. I checked the occupancy records and the emergency response map, the one we hand to the fire department so they know how to move through the building in the dark with smoke at the ceiling, wall. And then I checked the county GIS layer, the building footprint file, the authoritative digital model of what physically occupies that piece of ground, the thing that is supposed to be the final word. I loaded the Annex footprint and traced the interior partitions. There is no corridor in the model. The space between those 2 points is rendered as solid structure. So I had the entire documentary life of a building, drawn at different times by different people for different purposes under different regulatory standards. Fire marshals and architects and engineers and draftsmen and a GIS technician who never set foot in the place, and every single one of them agreed. There is no corridor there. There is a wall. At that point, a normal exception is already resolved. The corridor does not exist. Therefore, the patrol scan is garbage data. Therefore, I write it up as a vendor template error and I close it. So why couldn't I close it? Because of the records that should have agreed and didn't. I will get the patrol tag out of the way first, because it troubled me, and then it stopped being the thing that troubled me most. The checkpoint that fired inside the connector had a tag registered to it in the vendor system, an active checkpoint with a live scan timestamp, and a location field that read in plain text, Annex connector, level 1. A registered checkpoint for a place that does not exist. I noted it. It was strange. But the vendor's system is the vendor's system, and I have watched vendors register all kinds of nonsense. A bad checkpoint in a patrol database is, in the end, just a patrol database being wrong. I have spent my career watching the security side be wrong. What I could not get past was that the contradiction had crawled into my side, into the building records, into the documents that are supposed to be slow and conservative and signed and permanent. The patrol route was the alarm. The archive was where the fire was. Because while I was pulling the evacuation diagram revisions, I found one I had not seen before. The evacuation diagrams are versioned. Each revision has a number, a date, a reviewer. I knew the set. I had just read the whole set, every revision, wall after wall after wall. But when I went back to attach the current diagram to my exception file, the version list had one more entry than it had held an hour earlier. A new revision, a higher number, dated recently. I opened it. It was the Annex evacuation diagram, the same building, the same level. And in that block where every other revision draws solid structure, this one drew a corridor. A clean corridor between the east stair and the maintenance hall, with an egress arrow running through it, with a small exit notation at the far end, as if it had always been a way out. The connector, drawn into the official fire evacuation diagram, revised, versioned, filed. I checked the revision history on the document itself. Created recently. And then I checked who had reviewed it, and the reviewer field held a name and a credential, and I will come to that name because that is its own piece of this, and it is worse than a registered tag. I tried to do the thing a records man does when a document looks like it might walk. I tried to preserve it. I exported the evacuation diagram set to PDF, the official export, the kind I would attach to an escalation. The export completed. I opened it. The new revision was not in it. It was on my screen in the live archive, the corridor right there with its egress arrow. It was not in the PDF the archive had just generated from the same record. I ran it again. Same result. The live view held the corridor. The official export held only the old revisions, the ones with the wall, renumbered so the version sequence ran clean, so that anyone reading the exported set would see an unbroken history of a building that had always been solid in that block, with nothing missing, nothing skipped, nothing to ask about. So now I had a fire evacuation diagram that existed when I looked at it and ceased to exist the moment I tried to keep it. A way out of a building that you could see on the screen and could not carry out of the room. I checked the fire marshal inspection files again, because if the evacuation diagram had changed, I wanted to know whether the inspection record behind it had changed too. And there was a new attachment on one of the inspection files, a life safety inspection correction, a short form, the kind a marshal files when a deficiency is resolved or a route is re-accepted. This one accepted an egress route. The route through the connector. It referenced the corridor by name and accepted it as a compliant means of egress. The correction was marked verified. I looked at who had verified it. The verification carried the name and certification number of a fire marshal. I knew the name, the way you know a name that has crossed your files for years. He had inspected county buildings for a long time, including this one in the old days. His certification, I knew, had gone inactive years ago. And the reason it had gone inactive, I remembered, because these things are noted in the records the way everything is noted in the records, is that he had died. A life safety inspection correction, accepting an egress route through a wall marked verified by a fire marshal who has been dead for years, whose certification was already inactive, attached to an evacuation diagram that vanishes when you try to export it. I sat with that for a while. I did not feel what you feel in films. I felt the specific, cold, administrative dread of a man who has just understood that the problem on his desk is no longer a stale drawing, and that there is no revision code for a document signed by the dead. This is where I should tell you I leaned hard on the vendor, the way the security people would want me to, and made it the vendor's problem and walked away. I did contact them, briefly. I asked the patrol vendor's account contact to explain the connector checkpoint. The reply came from a supervisor on their side 3 days later, and it said the connector was an old legacy route configuration, a decommissioned checkpoint firing on an outdated template, no contract impact, disregard. It was the same sentence I had read 100 times over the years. No contract impact. the phrase that closes 1,000 exceptions. But the vendor's checkpoint was never the horror. A patrol database can be wrong, and it costs the county a few dollars of disputed billing. What had me at my desk past dark was that the county's own records, the fire maps, the inspection files, the things that are supposed to be the last honest word on whether a building will kill you, were quietly agreeing with the patrol database against me. The vendor was a footnote. The archive was the thing that had turned. So I stopped writing to the vendor and I took it to my supervisor. I am going to be careful about how I describe him because he is not a villain in this, and I have worked under him for 11 years, and I have come to believe he was more frightened than I understood at the time. I brought him the full picture, the live archive, the new evacuation revision with the corridor, the life safety correction verified by a dead Marshal, the export that dropped the revision, the full documentary record, every other drawing and diagram and inspection going back to 1968, all showing a wall. I kept my language flat and procedural. I said we have an egress route appearing in the fire evacuation diagram for a corridor that does not exist in any construction set, as built, permit, life safety report, maintenance diagram, or the GEES model, and it is verified under a credential that belongs to a man who is dead, and I cannot reconcile it, and I need guidance on how to record it. He looked at the screen for a long time. Longer than the problem deserved if it were nothing. Then he told me how to record it. He said to log it under the layout discrepancy code, a standing code we use for cases where the physical building and the documents disagree and the matter is not worth a full reconciliation. He said to mark it no egress impact. He said to mark it legacy. He said, above all, to keep it in codes. I said the egress diagram has it as an accepted route. That is not no egress impact. That is the opposite. He said to use the layout discrepancy code. I said the correction is verified by a man who is dead. What do I write about that? And he said the thing I have not been able to stop hearing. He said, don't put it in plain language. In our work there is the coded record and there is the written record. The codes are the drop-downs, the standing categories, the safe and bloodless slots. The written record is the free text field where you describe in sentences what you actually found, and that field is the one that becomes evidence if there is ever a dispute or a lawsuit. To write it down in sentences is to commit it. He told me not to. Use the discrepancy code. Don't describe the absence. And he said it more than once in more than one shape, the way a tired man repeats the thing he most needs you to hear. Don't describe the absence. Don't put a missing corridor into plain language. If it becomes a written contradiction, it becomes exposure. I asked him why not. He said because if I write in sentences that a corridor does not exist while the county's own fire evacuation diagram accepts it as an egress route, then either the evacuation diagram is wrong, which is a document we can quietly correct, or I am wrong, which is a me problem. And he said the third possibility, the one where the diagram and I are both telling the truth at the same time, is not a possibility the county is permitted to have in writing. He was not unkind when he said it. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been handed this same instruction once and had taken it. I asked him whether this had happened before. He did not answer that. He told me to close it under the discrepancy code and let the archive sort itself out. So I did. I want to be honest about that because I am not the hero of this and I will not pretend to be. I followed the instruction. I logged it as a legacy layout discrepancy, no egress impact, and I did not describe the absence. And I protected myself the way you learn to protect yourself after 3 decades, which is to say I did the thing that kept my name clean and asked no more questions in plain language. And the records kept moving. I should have left it there. The item was closed. The instruction was clear. My name was on nothing dangerous yet. There was no reason to keep pulling at it except the only reason that has ever mattered to me, which is that I could not stand not knowing whether the record was telling the truth. So I requested the CCTV. The Annex has its own camera system, separate from the patrol vendor, an old setup the facilities department maintained, indexed by corridor and stairwell. I file a review request, justify it against an open issue, and the facilities contact retrieves the clip. I justified mine against the layout discrepancy, which was a small, convenient lie, and I asked for the camera covering the rear of level 1, the stretch where the connector was supposed to be. But before the clip came, I did something that turned out to matter more than the clip. I pulled the camera schedule. The facility's camera schedule is just the index, the list of every camera in the building, each one tied to a location, a model, a maintenance date. It is a flat, dull document. I have read 100 of them. The Annex schedule listed a camera I did not expect. Camera level 1 Annex connector, on the schedule, with a model number and a maintenance history. A camera assigned to a location that the floorplan says is a wall. The camera schedule, a plain facilities inventory document, was now carrying a fixture inside the corridor that does not exist, as if someone had mounted it, wired it, and serviced it over the years. Then the clip came, and it came with a note. The note said the camera index for that segment was non-standard, that the footage might not correspond to the current floorplan, and that I should disregard any layout discrepancies. By then I had learned that every disclaimer in this matter was a door being quietly pulled shut behind me. I watched it. The current floorplan says the camera covering that area looks down the rear maintenance hall toward a blank wall, the same wall that separates it from the east stair. A short hall ending in cinder block, a riser cabinet, a service door to the chase. A dead end. The footage did not show a dead end. It showed the hall continuing past where the wall should be. The cinder block was not there. And along the corridor, the emergency lights were on, the way they stay on in an empty building at night, a low strip of them running down a hallway that on every drawing I own simply ends. They flickered the way old emergency fixtures do, and they lit a corridor that has no fixtures because it has no walls to mount them on. At the far end, past the point where the wall exists in every record we keep, there was a fire exit sign, the green kind, lit. An exit sign glowing beyond a wall I have touched, marking a way out that no life safety report has ever counted. And down that corridor, unhurried, a figure walked, not a guard. The footage was old enough and the timestamp odd enough that I almost looked past it, but the figure was carrying something, and after a moment I understood it was an inspector. A man with a clipboard and a measuring wheel, the kind a fire marshal or a building inspector runs along a corridor to log its length, walking the connector and measuring it, the way you measure a means of egress to certify it. He walked the full length of a corridor that does not exist, measuring it for the record, and at the far end he stopped under the exit sign and made a note. The infrared caught his face for a moment as he turned. I knew it, not well, but I had seen it in an old inspection file on a certification photo. It was the fire marshal, the one whose name was on the verified correction, the one who has been dead for years. I tried to save the clip. I had watched it once, streamed from the facility's portal. When I went back to request a download, the file was gone, and in its place was a folder marked restricted and a message stating that footage access for that camera index now required additional authorization and that my prior request had been logged as fulfilled. Fulfilled. I had been allowed to see it once, and the system recorded that I had received what I asked for and made certain I could never ask again. And then I found the record that ended my ability to keep building boring explanations. I went back to the life safety correction because I wanted to read the closure on it, the line that says the matter is resolved and signed off. The correction had a closure. It read, root verified, no further action. And it was stamped with a credential, and the credential was the dead marshal's, dated after his certification had gone inactive, after he was gone, a verification stamped by a man who could not have stamped it. I have read closures my whole life. A dead man does not log into a county portal and accept an egress route. A credential does not stamp itself. Either someone used his login or the system generated it, and I cannot tell you which of those is the worst thing to be true. But under that closure, attached to the same inspection record, was the review approval. In our process, a life safety inspection record has to be reviewed and accepted by a compliance auditor before it becomes part of the permanent file. That review is the gate. It is the moment a finding becomes official. It carries the reviewer's employee ID, his initials, his phrasing, and a timestamp. It is the cleanest, most accountable record we have because it is the one that says a human being looked at this and accepted it. The Annex inspection record, the one with the connector, had a review approval on it. The approval was mine, my employee ID, my initials, my exact phrasing. I have a way I write these, a habit of 30 years. Reviewed for compliance, conditions accepted, no exceptions noted. And there it was, word for word in my own form under my credential, dated nearly 5 months before the Annex file ever rolled to our office. I did not review that record. I went through my own calendar, my own assignment logs, my own access records. On the date of that approval, I was not assigned to the Annex. The file was not even ours yet. I had no access to it on that day. There is an access control log that shows me badging into our own building that morning and working an entirely different set of files, a water district matter all afternoon. I have the badge log. I can prove where I was to the minute, and the approval is still there. My initials, my words, accepting an inspection record I could not have seen for a corridor that does not exist, verified by a marshal who was already dead. I want to describe what that does to a man like me. It is not fear the way it looks in films. It is slower and worse than that. It is the quiet removal of the floor you have stood on your whole working life. Because my entire profession rests on one assumption, that the record is downstream of reality. That an approval means a person approved. That initials mean a person intended. That the file describes what happened after it happened because someone did it. And here was a file that ran the other way. A record that knew my hand before my hand had moved. An approval that existed before the thing it approved, before the file was mine, before I had ever heard the word connector applied to a wall. I did the only thing I had left that felt like my job. I drove out to the Annex, in daylight, on a Saturday. I told myself I was verifying the physical building against the floor plan, which is a legitimate compliance activity, exactly the kind of thing a man tells himself when he is doing something he cannot quite admit he is doing. I brought a printed copy of the current floor plan and the current evacuation diagram, folded under my arm. The Annex is what you would expect. A long, low municipal building going gray at the edges. Most of the windows dark, a few rooms still holding county archive boxes. The parking lot seamed with weeds. I let myself in through the main entrance with the county key, signed the access log the way I am required to, and walked back through the empty halls toward the rear of level 1, toward the maintenance hall, toward the wall. There was an evacuation placard by the east stair in its little frame on the wall, the way the code requires. I stopped and read it. It showed the wall, the long way around. It matched the printed diagram under my arm, and it matched every honest revision I had read. The posted placard, the one that would guide a person out of this building in a fire, knew nothing about a connector. I took that as a small mercy and walked on. The hall ends exactly where the floor plan says it ends. A blank wall, painted cinder block, a little water stain near the floor, a riser cabinet on the right, a service door to the chase on the left, a dead end. The most ordinary dead end in any public building in the country. I unfolded the printed floor plan and held it up against the space, the way I have done in 100 buildings, lining the drawing up with the structure. They matched. Wall for wall, the paper and the building agreed. I checked the evacuation diagram against the dead end, and it agreed too. The egress route bending away down the main hall, no connector, no arrow through the block. Then I looked at the wall itself closely, the way an inspector looks, and I wish I had not. There were screw holes in the cinder block, 4 of them set in the rectangle you would use to mount a sign at the height you would mount it. And above the holes, faint on the painted block, a shadow. A clean rectangle of slightly different color. The ghost a sign leaves when it hangs on a wall for years and the paint around it ages and the paint behind it does not. The shape and size of an exit sign. As if an exit sign had hung there on the dead-end wall, lit for a long time, marking a way out of a wall, and then been taken down and left its outline behind. I put my hand flat against the block. It was solid and cold and old and unmistakably real, and it had clearly stood in that spot for longer than I have held my job. There is no corridor here. I want that on the record in the plain language I was told never to use. There is no corridor here. The floor plan is right. The evacuation diagram is right. The placard is right. The wall is right. But I had my phone in my other hand, the facilities map open, the evacuation overlay loaded, my own location dot sitting at the end of the maintenance hall. I had kept it open the whole walk, half out of habit, half out of something I would not name. And as I stood at the dead end with my palm on the block and the screw holes under my thumb, the egress route on the screen did not stop at the wall. It continued, past my dot. Through the cinder block my hand was resting on. It bent left, where the service door is, and drew an arrow, and at the far end of it sat a small green exit marker, in a space that on my screen lay behind the wall. The corridor carried a label, Annex Connector, an accepted means of egress, drawn through the wall I was touching, ending at an exit that the screw holes above my thumb said had once hung right here. I stood there and watched a way out run through a wall that has no way out. Then the map refreshed, the way these apps do, recentering, reloading the tiles. The screen blinked, and when it came back, the egress route ended cleanly at the wall, the way it should, and the connector was gone, and the arrow was gone, and the exit marker was gone, and the diagram looked entirely ordinary, and there was nothing left on my phone that I could have shown to another living person as proof of what I had just seen. Only the screw holes were still there in the block under my hand, and a sign-shaped shadow that I could not photograph in a way that meant anything to anyone. I drove home. I did not sleep that night, or well for many nights after. I went on doing my job. I reconciled drawings. I reviewed inspection files. I argued the water district matter down to a number both sides could live with. I drank the bad coffee out of the same chipped mug. I behaved like a man who had decided to let a thing lie, because that is exactly what I had decided. But I kept one habit. Every few days I checked the facility's document archive for the Annex. I told myself I was monitoring an open concern. The truth is I was watching that wall in the archive the way you keep checking a door you already know is locked, not because you expect it to be open, but because you can no longer fully believe it will stay shut. That is how I found the last record. There is a new document in the county facilities archive now. Recent. It appeared sometime in the last few weeks. It is not a patrol route. It is not a vendor file at all. It is a life safety inspection report for the Annex, the kind of facilities inspector files after walking the building and documenting its condition, corridor by corridor, the kind of report that feeds the fire map and the evacuation diagram and becomes part of the permanent record of what the building is and how it lets you out. This report includes the connector. It describes it. Annex connector, level 1, running between the east stair landing and the rear maintenance hall. It documents the corridor's condition, its length, its egress signage. It carries an updated evacuation diagram attached in which that block of the building is no longer solid, in which a corridor runs through the wall I put my hand on, with an egress arrow through it and a green exit marker at the end, as if it had always been a way out. And on the egress acceptance line it states, in the flat phrasing of the form, egress route accepted, no life safety impact. The report is signed. My employee ID, my initials, my phrasing, reviewed for compliance, conditions documented, no exceptions noted. The report is dated next year. It is dated a day I have not lived yet, a day that has not happened. A day on which, according to the county facilities document archive, I will walk the Annex, document a corridor that does not exist, attach an evacuation diagram that draws a way out through a load-bearing wall, accept it as a compliant means of egress, sign it under my own credential, and note no exceptions. I have not done it. I am telling you now plainly, on whatever record this becomes, that I have not walked that building for that report, that I have not signed it, that I have not accepted any egress route through any wall, and that I do not intend to. But my initials are already on it. My words are already on it. The system already knows the form my acceptance will take, the same way it knew the form of the approval it stamped 5 months before the file was ever mine. To the archive, the difference between months ago and next year is nothing at all. They are both simply dates with my name attached, one behind me and one ahead of me, and the record does not appear to consider either of them more uncertain than the other. I raised it once more, carefully, with my supervisor. I did not show him the future date. I had learned that much. I only asked, in a general way, whether there was a process for disputing an inspection signature or a life safety acceptance that the reviewer does not recognize as his own. He looked at me for a while, the tired look again, the look of a man who knows the question and has already lost the argument it leads to. He said the safest course is to leave the record as it stands. He said a dispute creates a written contradiction, and a written contradiction creates exposure, and exposure is the one thing we are paid to prevent. He said the corridor item carried no egress impact. He said it was a legacy discrepancy. He said, the way you would close any file that is not worth the trouble of opening, no further action. So the records still hold. Somewhere in the facility's archive, an evacuation diagram draws an egress route through a wall and refuses to come out in the export. A life safety correction accepts that route, verified by a fire marshal who is dead. A camera schedule lists a fixture inside a corridor that no construction set, no as built, no permit, no fire map, no inspection file, no GES model, and no wall I have touched with my own hand will admit exists. The first approval still carries my initials. On a day the access logs prove I spent somewhere else. And the wall in the rear of level 1 still has its 4 screw holes and its sign-shaped shadow, the outline of an exit that was never in any record, marking a way out of a dead end. And the inspection report still waits, dated next year with my name already on it, with a way out drawn through a wall that has no way out, egress route accepted, no life safety impact. Ready for the day the system has already decided I will walk that building and sign. I have the construction drawings and the as-builts and the fire maps and the evacuation diagrams and the inspection archive. I have the permits. I have the access logs. I have my calendar and the badge record of where I was, and the memory of cold cinder block under my hand on a Saturday afternoon, and 4 screw holes and a shadow. I have every record and every reason to know, with the certainty I have built my whole career on, that the corridor is not there, and that I never accepted it and never will. The system has my initials. I keep returning to the thing my supervisor said we are not allowed to have. One of us has to be wrong, the record or the man. That was always the rule. The record is downstream of reality, and when they disagree, somebody made an error and you find the error and you correct it and you move on. That is the work. That is the whole of the work. I am telling you the truth. The corridor is not there. There is no way out through that wall. And the record is sitting right beside me, telling you the same thing I am telling you, except backwards, in my own words, in my own form, under my own initials, dated for a day that has not yet come, accepting an egress route through a wall I have touched with my hand. No life safety impact. Legacy corridor discrepancy. No further action.